The phone rang, piercing the quiet evening in my apartment. Dad's name flashed on the screen, sending a wave of complicated emotions through me. It had been months since our last brief conversation, 20 years since he left me with Grandma, at age 5, when he married Stephanie. Grandma raised me alone, loving me enough for 2 parents. Now she was gone, leaving me with an unexpected inheritance. Something felt off about Dad's sudden call. Stephanie wanted to meet urgently. My stomach knotted with foreboding. Before I tell you this heartbreaking story, let me know where you are watching from. Do not forget to like and subscribe, so you do not miss my next raw, honest journey about family betrayal and finding strength. I still remember those early years with both my parents. We lived in a modest house in a friendly neighborhood in Minnesota. My mom was incredible, always patient with a laugh that could brighten the darkest room. She baked cookies every Sunday, read me stories with different voices for each character, and taught me to be kind to everyone. When I was 4, she was diagnosed with an aggressive form of cancer. Within 6 months, she was gone. I remember fragments of that time, like watching cartoons in her hospital room and not understanding why she got thinner, or why Dad cried when he thought I was asleep. After Mom died, Dad changed. The man who used to swing me around the backyard became distant, often staring at nothing for hours. I tried making him laugh with my dinosaur impressions that once made him double over with laughter, but his smiles became rare and forced. I was too young to understand grief, but old enough to feel the shift in our home. Then Stephanie entered the picture. Dad met her at his accounting firm, where she worked as a receptionist. She was 27, 15 years younger than Dad, with perfect blonde hair and a smile that seemed warm at first. Dad started coming home later, then leaving early on weekends. 6 months after they met, he announced they were getting married. From the beginning, Stephanie made it clear I was an inconvenience. When I asked for breakfast, she would sigh dramatically and say, "Your dad spoiled you too much." When I left toys in the living room, she would complain about living in a daycare. She never hit me or yelled loudly, but her coldness was its own kind of cruelty. "Your mom would have taught you better manners," she once muttered, when I spilled juice at dinner. Dad was right there, but said nothing, just stared at his plate. The worst part was watching Dad change. He stopped tucking me in at night, because, "Stephanie says you need to learn independence." He no longer defended me when I was blamed for things I didn't do. It was as if Stephanie had cast a spell over him, making him forget he was a father. The morning everything changed started normally. Dad packed a small suitcase with my clothes while I ate cereal. "We're going to visit Grandma," he said with forced cheerfulness. Grandma lived an hour away, and I was excited to see her. She always had cookie dough ice cream and let me stay up late. When we arrived, Grandma hugged me tightly while Dad quickly carried my suitcase to her spare bedroom. "It'll just be for a few days, Mom," I heard him tell her in the kitchen. "Stephanie and I need to work some things out." When he came to say goodbye, I ran to hug him. He patted my back stiffly, avoiding my eyes. "Be good for Grandma, Steve," he said, already walking toward the door. I watched from the window as his car disappeared down the street, not knowing that was the last time I would see my father regularly for years. The first week, I asked Grandma every day when Dad was coming back. She would smile sadly and say, "Soon, sweetie." I overheard her phone conversations with Dad, her voice growing increasingly frustrated. "Frank, he asks about you every day." "No, I understand you're busy, but he needs his father." "Next weekend, then, promise him this time." Stephanie's feelings? What about your son's feelings? Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. Dad's promised visits were canceled last minute. His phone calls became shorter. By the time I started first grade, it was clear that a few days had become permanent. Grandma's house became my home. It was small but cozy, with faded floral wallpaper and family photos everywhere. She lived in a quiet suburb with tree-lined streets where kids rode bikes until streetlights came on. Her backyard had an old apple tree, perfect for climbing. Grandma was in her 60s then, with silver-streaked hair she kept in a neat bun. She had been a nurse before retiring, and her hands were gentle but strong. She never said a bad word about my father, even when I knew she was angry with him. "Your daddy loves you," she would say, brushing my hair before school. "Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes they don't know how to fix." She worked part-time at a local library to supplement her pension. I would sit doing homework while she shelved books, the librarian slipping me candy when Grandma wasn't looking. On tight months, she would sell her beautiful hand-knitted sweaters at craft fairs. She never complained, but I noticed how she would study grocery store flyers for sales and mend clothes instead of buying new ones. At night, when she thought I was asleep, I sometimes heard her crying softly. Only then did I understand the burden my father had placed on her aging shoulders, and the depth of her love that made her carry it without complaint. Middle school brought a new set of challenges. While other kids talked about weekend trips with their parents, I invented stories about my dad being away on important business trips. The truth felt too shameful to share, even with friends. Dad would show up occasionally, always with advanced notice, so we could prepare. He missed my 10th birthday, but sent an expensive gaming system. For my 13th, he arrived 3 hours late after most guests had gone home, staying just long enough for cake before claiming a work emergency. When I was 14, he brought Stephanie and their twin daughters, Emma and Lily, to my middle school graduation. They were 5 years old, cute with matching blonde ponytails. Dad proudly introduced them to my teachers as his girls. I stood awkwardly to the side, feeling like an outsider in my own celebration. "Your sisters are so excited to meet their big brother," Dad said, as if we were one big happy family with just a slight living arrangement quirk. The twins stared at me curiously while Stephanie checked her watch repeatedly. They left before the reception ended, Dad promising to catch up properly soon. In high school, I channeled my hurt into academics. If I couldn't make my father proud enough to want me, I would achieve enough to make myself proud. I joined debate team, ran track, and maintained a 4.0 GPA. Grandma attended every meet, competition, and parent-teacher conference, cheering louder than anyone. By junior year, I had stopped hoping for Dad's approval. When he missed my debate team winning state championships, I felt nothing but a dull resignation. The emptiness had become familiar, like an old scar that only aches when the weather changes. "You don't need his validation," my best friend Jake told me after Dad skipped my 18th birthday. "Look at everything you've accomplished without him." During senior year, college applications became my focus. With my grades and extracurriculars, I received scholarship offers from several universities. When my acceptance letter from Northwestern arrived with a full academic scholarship, Grandma cried with pride. Dad sent a text. "Good job, son. Always knew you were smart like your old man." I chose Northwestern for their excellent finance program, but also because Chicago was far enough from Minnesota to feel like a fresh start. The distance helped me build a life that was truly my own, undefined by abandonment. Freshman year, I noticed Grandma seemed more tired during our weekly video calls. She insisted it was just getting older, but I worried. When I came home for Christmas, I saw her wince when standing and how she needed to rest after short walks. By sophomore year, I was working 2 part-time jobs along with full-time studies. One at the university library, another waiting tables on weekends. I sent money home monthly, ignoring Grandma's protests. "Save it for yourself," she would say. But I knew her medications were expensive. During junior year, Dad called asking for $5,000 to help with Emma's private school tuition. "Your sisters are gifted," he explained. "The public schools just can't challenge them properly." "Did you ever consider private school for me?" I asked, before I could stop myself. "That was different," he replied quickly. "Your grandmother wanted to keep you in the local school." I knew this was a lie. Grandma had actually researched better school districts, but couldn't afford to move. "I can't help," I said finally. "My money goes to Grandma's health care." "Family helps family, Steve," he said, his voice taking on a disappointed tone I had become immune to years ago. "Yes," I replied. "That's exactly what I'm doing." After graduation, I was hired by a financial advisory firm in Chicago. My starting salary allowed me to rent a small but decent apartment in Lincoln Park, and more importantly, to buy a comfortable condo for Grandma closer to my location. She initially refused, saying it was too much, but I convinced her by explaining I needed her closer as she aged. The truth was, I had watched her struggle up the stairs to her second-floor bedroom one too many times. I had seen her medical bills piling up. I knew she was cutting her heart medication in half to make it last longer. The years of raising a child alone in her 60s and 70s had taken their toll. My independent, strong grandma was becoming frail. When she finally agreed to move, I felt a relief so profound, I had to sit down. Our new arrangement worked well. I visited her several times weekly. We had Sunday dinners, where she still insisted on cooking, despite my protests. She joined a senior center nearby and made friends who played cards and went to matinee movies. Dad, Mark's ***, and Stephanie bought a large house in an exclusive suburb of Minneapolis. Their Facebook photos showed European vacations, the twins in expensive horseback riding outfits, a backyard pool. Dad's sporadic calls usually centered around the girls' achievements or his work promotions. He rarely asked about my life or Grandma's health. When Grandma turned 80, I threw her a surprise party. Friends from her senior center, former neighbors, and even librarians from her old job came. Dad sent flowers, but had a scheduling conflict with the twins' dance recital. 2 years later, everything changed again. Grandma fell in her bathroom. The emergency button I had insisted she wear saved her life. At the hospital, doctors discovered cancer had spread throughout her body. 6 months, maybe less, the doctor told us gently. We can make her comfortable. I took a leave of absence from work to care for her. Those months were both heartbreaking and precious. As her body weakened, our conversations deepened. She told me stories about her youth, about my mother, about dreams she had never shared. I emailed Dad about Grandma's condition. He called her once, sent another flower arrangement, and promised to visit as soon as things settled down at work. He never came, not even when I called to tell him the end was near. The girls have finals, Stephanie explained in the background. It would be too disruptive. Grandma died peacefully in my arms on a Tuesday morning in April. The cherry tree outside her window was blooming, filling her room with soft pink light. Her last words to me were, "You were always enough, Steve. Remember that." Planning a funeral alone at 32 was not something I had prepared for. The funeral home director was kind, guiding me through decisions about caskets, flowers, and service arrangements. Grandma had left detailed instructions, making the process somewhat easier, but the weight of finality pressed heavily on my shoulders. The service was held at the small Methodist church Grandma had attended for decades. The pews filled with people whose lives she had touched, each with stories about her kindness, her humor, her quiet strength. I stood greeting mourners, accepting hugs from people who had watched me grow up, many noting how proud she had been of the man I became. Dad arrived 20 minutes late with Stephanie and the twins, now 15. They slipped into a back pew during the first hymn. Dad looked older than I expected, with thinning hair and a slight paunch straining his suit buttons. Stephanie was still attractive, but with the tight, frozen quality that comes from too many cosmetic procedures. The twins looked uncomfortable in their black dresses, clearly uncertain about why they were there. After the service, Dad approached awkwardly. "Beautiful service, son. Mom would have liked it." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Stephanie hugged me stiffly, her expensive perfume momentarily overwhelming. "Such a shame," she murmured. "Your grandmother was always so independent." As they moved toward the refreshments, I overheard Stephanie whisper to Dad, "Did she leave a will? The house must be worth something in this market." The reading of the will was scheduled for the following week at the office of Walter Abernathy, Grandma's attorney and friend of 30 years. I arrived early, expecting a simple meeting. Walter, a kind-faced man in his 70s, greeted me warmly. "Your grandmother was a remarkable woman, Steve," he said, as we settled in his office. "And much smarter than most people realized." I nodded, thinking of her clever card game strategies and crossword puzzle skills. "No," Walter continued. "I mean financially shrewd. Very few people knew this side of her." He opened a folder and began explaining something that left me stunned. Grandma, the woman who clipped coupons and bought generic brands, had been quietly investing since her 30s. She started with small amounts from her nursing salary, focusing on solid dividend stocks and bonds. When my grandfather died young, she invested his modest life insurance wisely instead of spending it. "She never touched the principal," Walter explained. "Only reinvested the earnings. For over 50 years. The result was astonishing. My grandmother had accumulated assets worth approximately $1.2 million. The portfolio included her condo, several blue-chip stocks, municipal bonds, and cash savings. She named you as her sole beneficiary, Walter said, sliding the document toward me. With this letter to be opened now. With trembling hands, I unfolded her familiar stationery, with pressed flowers in the corners. My dearest Steve, she wrote, if you are reading this, I have gone to join your mother and grandfather. Do not grieve too long. I have had a full life, blessed with your presence. The money and assets I leave you represent years of careful planning. Some might question why everything goes to you alone. The answer is simple. You were the one who stayed. When your father left you with me, claiming it would be temporary, I promised myself I would ensure your future security. This inheritance is not just money. It is my love, my belief in you, and my way of remaining your safety net, even after I am gone. Use it wisely, but do not forget to use some for joy. You deserve both security and happiness. All my love, eternally, Grandma. Tears streamed down my face as Walter discreetly busied himself with paperwork. When I could speak again, he explained the process of transferring assets and the tax implications. As news of the inheritance spread, my phone began buzzing constantly with messages from Dad. After years of sporadic contact, he suddenly had time for daily calls and texts filled with reminiscences about the good old days and mentions of family sticking together. Stephanie, who had never shown interest in my life, began commenting on my social media posts with excessive enthusiasm. So proud of my stepson. Family is everything, appeared under photos that had been online for months without her notice. The twins sent friend requests and sweet messages about wanting to know their brother better. I accepted, seeing no reason to hold their father's actions against them. Then came the dinner invitation. We need to reconnect as a family, Dad insisted. Come to our home this Friday. Their house was exactly as the Facebook photo suggested. Large, professionally decorated, with the hollow feel of a showroom rather than a home. Family pictures lined the entryway, the girls at various ages in professional portraits. I noticed none included me. Dad hugged me awkwardly at the door, while Stephanie air-kissed near my cheek. The twins seemed genuinely pleased to see me, asking questions about Chicago and my job. I found myself warming to them despite my reservations. Dinner was elaborate but uncomfortable, with Dad attempting to bridge 20 years of absence with superficial questions about my hobbies and work. Stephanie dominated the conversation, repeatedly mentioning the difficult financial climate and how family businesses are struggling these days. After dessert, the twins were sent upstairs to finish homework, though I noticed them lingering on the landing within earshot. So, Stephanie said, once they were supposedly gone, Walter Abernathy called your father. I raised an eyebrow. That seems unprofessional. They play golf together, Dad explained quickly. It came up casually. What came up? I asked, though I already knew. Your inheritance, Stephanie said bluntly. Walter mentioned the amount. Very impressive. Your grandmother was quite the secret investor. Yes, I replied carefully. She was remarkable in many ways. The thing is, Stephanie continued, leaning forward, we've been thinking about family responsibility and sharing resources. Dad nodded, eyes downcast. Your father is your grandmother's only child, Stephanie pressed. By rights, a significant portion of her estate should go to him. I sat very still, processing her audacity. How much were you thinking? I asked, my voice neutral. Stephanie smiled, clearly thinking I was receptive. Well, considering your father's contribution to the family over the years, 70% seems fair. His contribution, I repeated, unable to mask my disbelief. Yes, she continued smoothly. Supporting the household. Maintaining family connections. Dad finally spoke. Son, we're in a bit of financial trouble. The business has been struggling. The market crashed right after we refinanced the house. The girls' college funds. We're facing foreclosure, Stephanie interjected dramatically. After everything we've been through, raising 2 children on a single income. Single income? I echoed. Well, I had to stay home with the girls, she explained. We couldn't afford proper childcare. That's partly why we couldn't take you in back then. 2 children were our maximum capacity financially. The room seemed to tilt slightly. I looked at my father, waiting for him to defend his choices, to acknowledge the absurdity of what was happening. He stared at his empty plate. I thought of Grandma working well into her 70s to support me. I thought of the modest lifestyle we lived while Dad and Stephanie enjoyed luxury. I thought of Grandma's last days, when Dad couldn't be bothered to visit. Slowly, I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out Grandma's letter. "I'd like to read something to you," I said calmly, unfolding the letter. My hands were steady now, my voice clear. "When your father left you with me, claiming it would be temporary, I promised myself I would ensure your future security," I read aloud, watching Dad flinch at the words. "This inheritance is not just money. It is my love, my belief in you, and my way of remaining your safety net even after I am gone." I folded the letter carefully and looked directly at my father. "Did you know Grandma worked at the library until she was 78, even with arthritis making it painful to shelve books?" Dad shifted uncomfortably. "Mom was always independent. She liked working." "She worked because she had to," I corrected. "Because raising a child in your 60s requires money, and the child support checks you sent covered barely a third of the actual expenses." Stephanie interjected. "Financial struggles happen in every family. We had our own challenges." "Let me ask you something, Dad," I continued, ignoring her. "Do you remember my 10th grade science fair? I built a working model of a wind turbine. It won first place." Dad frowned. "Of course I remember. I was very proud." "You weren't there," I said quietly. "You promised to come but called last minute because Emma had a cold." "Children get sick, Steve," Stephanie said defensively. "What about my high school graduation?" I continued. "Or when I broke my arm in 8th grade. Or when I got into Northwestern. Where were you when Grandma had her hip surgery, and I took 3 buses to get to the hospital because I was 15 and couldn't drive?" Dad's face had grown pale. "I tried my best under difficult circumstances." "Your circumstances," I said, gesturing around the expensive room, included a 5-bedroom house, European vacations, and private school tuitions. Your circumstances were choices, Dad. Choices that never included me. Stephanie's patience visibly thinned. "This is ancient history. The point is, your father deserves part of his mother's estate. We need that money." "No," I said simply. "You want that money. There's a difference. After everything we've done for you," she began. I laughed without humor. "What exactly have you done for me, Stephanie? Name one thing." She faltered, then rallied. "We kept the family connection. We invited you to holidays." "I spent every Christmas with Grandma," I corrected. "You sent cards sometimes, usually late." "This is ridiculous," she snapped. "Frank, tell your son about our financial situation. Tell him how serious this is." Dad looked up, finally meeting my eyes. "Son, we made mistakes. I made mistakes. But we're family. Family helps family." "Yes," I agreed. "Family does help family. Grandma helped me when you wouldn't. She showed up every day for 27 years while you showed up for photo opportunities and bragging rights." I stood up, tucking Grandma's letter back into my pocket. "The inheritance stays where Grandma intended it to stay. With the person who stayed with her." Stephanie's face contorted with anger. "You ungrateful little—" "I'm not that scared 5-year-old anymore," I interrupted calmly. "I'm not waiting by the window for a father who never comes back. I'm a 32-year-old man who was raised by an extraordinary woman who taught me my worth is not determined by those who abandoned me." I turned to leave, then paused, seeing the twins on the staircase. Their faces shocked by what they had heard. "Emma Lily," I said gently, "none of this is your fault. If you ever want to know about your grandmother, about the amazing woman she was, I'd be happy to tell you. My door is always open to you both." Stephanie started to object, but Dad raised his hand, silencing her for once. He looked defeated, the facade of a successful family man crumbling before my eyes. "The money," I said at the door, "was never the real inheritance Grandma left me. The real wealth was learning that family is defined by actions, not blood, by who stays, not who leaves." As I drove back to my hotel, a weight I had carried since childhood seemed to lift. For the first time, I saw my father clearly, not as the mythical figure I had longed for, but as a flawed man who had made selfish choices. The anger that had smoldered for decades began to cool, replaced by something like pity. In the months that followed, I created a new relationship with my inheritance and my past. I established a scholarship fund in Grandma's name for students raised by grandparents. I joined a support group for adult children of parental abandonment. Finding healing in shared stories, I sought therapy to process the complex grief of losing the one parent who had truly been present, while still carrying the wound of the one who had chosen to be absent. My therapist helped me understand that forgiveness was not about excusing my father's behavior, but about freeing myself from its power over me. Your grandmother gave you two priceless gifts, my therapist observed. Financial security and emotional resilience. Both will serve you for life. 6 months after our confrontation, I received a text message from Emma, asking if we could meet for coffee next time I visited Minnesota. We met at a small cafe near her school, away from their house. I never knew, she said after we exchanged awkward greetings, about you being left with Grandma. Mom and Dad always said you chose to live with her because you were closer to her. That wasn't the case, I said gently. I figured that out, she replied with surprising maturity. After that dinner, I started noticing things. How Dad avoids difficult conversations. How Mom controls everything. I started wondering what else they hadn't told us. We talked for 2 hours. She asked about Grandma, about my childhood, about what kind of brother I might have been if circumstances were different. Before leaving, she asked if Lily could join us next time. We both want to know our brother, she said, if you'll let us. That conversation began a new chapter. The twins and I developed a relationship independent of our parents. They visited me in Chicago during spring break. I attended their high school graduation, sitting not with Dad and Stephanie, but with friends they had invited. I never gave Dad and Stephanie the money they demanded, but I did help the twins with college expenses when they chose schools their parents didn't approve of. Emma studied social work, inspired partly by our grandmother's story. Lily pursued environmental science. Both grew into thoughtful young women I was proud to know. As for the rest of Grandma's inheritance, I lived by her advice. I invested wisely, but also allowed myself joy. I bought a comfortable home, traveled to places she had always wanted to see, carrying her memory with me. I donated to causes she had valued, libraries, children's education, senior assistance programs. The greatest lesson Grandma left me was that family is not always who we are born to, but who chooses to love us completely. Sometimes, the people who leave our lives make space for those who truly deserve to be there. And sometimes, the most valuable inheritance is not what can be counted in dollars, but in the courage to stand tall in the face of betrayal and the capacity for compassion even when confronted with selfishness. Have you ever had to stand up to family members who only appeared when money was involved? What would you have done in my situation? Let me know in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to support more authentic stories about family dynamics and healing from childhood wounds. Share this video with someone who might need to hear that their worth is not defined by those who left them behind. Thank you for listening, and remember that sometimes the family we choose is more valuable than the family we are born into.